Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen wrapped up her testimony before the House Homeland Security Committee, and she faced some intense questioning.
Nielsen addressed issues like the zero-tolerance policy, family separations, and the record number of migrants who are now crossing the border. It is just one of 3 hearings on the Hill focusing on immigration and border security taking place today.
Yesterday, the White House released a tweet saying Nielsen briefed the President Trump on the, quote, national security crisis on the southern border. Nielsen was directly questioned about working with President Trump.
Do you believe that you, as Secretary of Homeland Security, have the independence of the White House to make the right decisions? Can you independently make a decision in contrary to the President of the United States on behalf of the American people for what is best for them?
Ma'am, what I can tell you is I take my oath with utmost extreme importance. I always do my best.
Is your oath to the American people, your oath to the President of the United States?
No, ma'am. The oath, as you know, is to the Constitution and the people of the
right. And in that vein, do you have the ability to make independent determinations?
I do what I believe is best for the men and women of DHS in this country.
And have you advised the President on his emergency declaration? Have you given him the grounds for this emergency declaration in the context of what emergency means?
What I have done is I've given him all the facts from the men and women working at the border, many of whom I know you all have met with, and thank you for that. So what I do is I give him the operational reality. Here's what we're facing, here's what we're seeing, here are the facts. By my read of it, it is an emergency, it is a dual crisis. That's the information I provide.
Well,
This comes as a new report from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection shows migrant families are crossing the U.S.-Mexico border in record numbers. Just over 76,000 migrants crossed legal ports of entry or were apprehended by Border Patrol in the month of February. That is the highest number for February in the last 12 years. Unaccompanied children and families with children made up 65% of those crossings. 6,825 unaccompanied kids and more than 36,000 families were apprehended at the border last month. Border officials say smugglers know that children have an easier chance of getting through Border Patrol. Those numbers represent a 300% increase in the number of family units at the border compared to the same time last year. Many of those children and families who are trying to cross the border are coming from Central American countries like Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Officials say there has been a 90% increase in immigrants who are claiming asylum. Border Patrol agents believe the recent increase in crossings is due to immigration crackdowns. In February, President Trump declared a national emergency in efforts to build that wall on the southern border. These new numbers represent the highest single-month total since Trump was elected in November 2016.
NBC News national security and justice reporter Julia Ainsley joins us now. Julia, you cover this very closely. Over 70,000 immigrants crossed the border in February. What is causing the increase?
Well, there are a number of things, Allie. I mean, we've seen numbers around 50 to 60,000 typically over the last year. That was higher compared to when Trump first came in because there was a dip based on that harsh rhetoric he used on the campaign trail. Now we're seeing over 70,000. I think it was 76,000. That really takes us back to numbers we hadn't seen since 2008. And Stephanie said it was the highest February in 12 years. So what they're saying is that it's coming from violence in Central America, but it's also a result. If you can look at the difference in policies that have played out over time. We saw just before Trump came into office, there was a spike because smugglers were telling people, get in before he builds that wall. And it could be that they are sending that same message now as they try to manipulate the system. They want more people to be paying them to bring up more people. So in a way, when Trump decides to announce something like this, it appeases his base. It actually does the opposite. I think you can see today Nielsen was getting pressure from both sides, but the real pressure will be from this administration who's going to be unhappy with this rise at a time where the president has taken extreme measures, taking military funding to build this wall. They are now seeing an extreme spike in border numbers.
But hold on, will they be unhappy with the rise, or does it suit the president's narrative? If the president's narrative is, we've got a national emergency, I need to build a wall, right? And then you look at the numbers spike, don't those numbers start to back up the argument that he's making?
Well, yeah, he could say that he's needing it for that, but if you actually look into these numbers, as we try to unpack this every time we're on together, we know that these numbers are not being caused by people who would be blocked by a wall. They're asylum seekers. They are walking up to Customs and Border Protection, turning themselves in. And you have to think that in 2020, if you're someone who came to the voting booth to vote for Donald Trump because you were worried about illegal immigration, that these numbers would be concerning to you, that you would be able to see that after 4 years, he's actually not put a dent in it, and that's actually at a much higher rate than we saw when President Obama was in office. So, and that way, it could have a backlash on him if this is one of his key issues, and he's simply not achieving it.
Congressman Alyssa Saltkin addressed children in cages at migrant camps at the border during the testimony. Let's listen.
So what did you do? I understand it's complicated. We have a big bureaucratic system. When you saw those pictures of babies in cages, what did you do? What did you do to just scream bloody murder up the chain to the president, to say, I cannot represent an agency that is forcing its border patrol to do this? What did you do?
So I went to the border. I spoke to the men and women there. I looked at the facilities myself. I talked to HHS to understand and visited their facilities as well to understand the care that they provide to the children once they're in their custody. And then I spent a tremendous amount of time working with the Northern Triangle in Mexico to stop the phenomena closer to the source, to help stabilize those areas so that the children and families are not traveling here.
Julia, it continues to be a sort of a horrible situation inside of those facilities. Is there any chance that that's going to get better?
Well, the reason the situation is horrible, at this point, you know, we aren't systematically separating parents from their children, but these people are there because they're backed up in the system. They're supposed to be transferred over to ICE or HHS, where they have better conditions for holding these people. They're not supposed to be in those places that we saw with the chain link fencing, the cages for more than 72 hours. But when we have more border crossings, this is what happened. And actually, Allie, they're building another facility like those that we saw over the summer. We just learned yesterday they're building another processing facility in El Paso, Texas, simply to be able to take in more of these people. So while we aren't seeing children without their parents in these places, we will see more of these places that really aren't equipped to hold people more than 72 hours. And we are seeing more deaths of children in the custody of Customs and Border Protection. There was just a stillborn child very recently, and we know that 2 children died in their custody in December. They're trying to ramp up medical attention, but as we've seen in reports, they simply aren't able to get the medical attention where they need to. And in a lot of cases, immigrants are saying that their concerns, their symptoms just aren't being listened to. They're not being treated like patients.
What about the report that came out last week that more than 4,000 allegations are out there of sexual misconduct that were reported to the Office of Refugee Resettlement between 2015 and 2018? Is the White House addressing this report? Is Kirstjen Nielsen being asked about it?
It really didn't come up today as much as I thought it would, Stephanie. I mean, obviously, this is something they've been asking about because those numbers were staggering. And a lot of those, at least 78, were committed by staff, personnel against these children, and they weren't addressed seriously. So we're going to keep pressing on that. That is something that HHS has had to take up, somewhat more so than DHS. But DHS is responsible for sending the children to those conditions in the first place, and it all falls under the umbrella of this administration.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.